Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
All right. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter. I'm Sean. Mark, raise your hand. There you go. And there's Rich. And fresh from his campaign to Gastown in the Bullet Farm, where I believe he was quoted as remarking moo. 12th Dan and Rex Kwon Do, newly made 3rd Dan Miyagi-Do, but first Dan in your heart, the K-Man.
Hello.
I'm a bit jealous of that intro. Wow. I thought you were going to go with Imperator Kelly, but
let's see. Well, I wanted to open the show by saying something, and this is from my heart. Zack Snyder should never be given a pencil or a pen or a computer or anything that can record the written word ever again. He should purely be given the reins, perhaps to a camera, with limited use of slow motion. Okay, not too much. You got to back him off a little bit. Okay, he needs a lot of people around him to get something, something useful there. But I was not a fan of Rebel Moon. I did not like that at all. I don't want to make this a whole episode about that because that would piss me off. But I did not like Rebel Moon, and I felt like his creds went down. Not since I'd seen Sucker Punch has it been down that much. Did you feel that way, Mark?
I did. Like, I came into this wanting it to be good, hoping for it to be what it was. Some of the early reviews came out. They were like Rotten Tomatoes was like they were bad, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to watch any review videos. I'm not going to listen to that. So I tuned in Thursday night for the premiere and like watched it, and it just, it you could see what it imitated, and it didn't imitate it well, right? That cantina scene, bit of an homage, but not a really, really good homage. You know what I'm saying? And I wanted it to be better. And like Sucker Punch had better action, right? And again, it's not a hard sell to do Seven Samurai in space with a Star Wars vibe. And there was some 40K elements in there as well. Like those, that one freighter that they're on looked like a giant Thunderhawk. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, that's cool. Sean, you're muted or something.
Not only that, did you notice that the robot was made, or what did they say? It was a remnant of the Mechanicus.
Yes, yeah.
And so Helena even said at one point with one of the slow motion still shots, she was like, hey, that looks like, and I said, don't say it. Don't say it. It's going to piss me off. And she said, no, but it looks like the cover of one of your books. I know. That's what I'm saying. Don't say it.
It was almost good. It was almost like it was approaching the things that would have made it amazing, but it just didn't quite deliver. You know what I'm saying? No. Like I don't need a complicated plot. Hey man, we want to hire a bunch of badass soldiers to come save our farm. Okay, I'm there. Let's do it. Magnificent Seven. All day long. And it wasn't hard to like gather up these soldiers. It was like, hey, I know a guy, let's go get him. And I'm like, hey, if you can ride this Griffin, I'll let you out of your 12 years more of servitude and all of the, I was like, that didn't make any sense.
Has there ever been a movie where the protagonist is like one of those dudes from like John Wick or what's his face from Nobody or whatever, and there was no backstory? He just went in there, he was doing his thing, wanted revenge and all that, and that's all they gave you. They realized, the backstory really doesn't matter. Everybody's just here to see the really cool stuff afterwards. Why even pretend? Let's just have him do his thing. And anybody asks him, well, why are you doing this? Doesn't matter. He's just there to do his thing.
Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider, Clint Eastwood. No backstory.
No, but they did give backstory.
Did they? I thought he was a mysterious man who wandered in.
You're echoing, sir. What'd you say? Would you call me?
I thought he was just a mysterious man who wandered in.
No, they gave backstory on that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
But
it was very minimalist, though.
It was minimalist, but they gave it to you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, you don't remember the moments of recognition between him and the bad guy and all that stuff. And
You know who didn't have a backstory? It was one of my favorite characters,
what's
Victor
that?
from La Femme Nikita.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, but he was from the company,
I
and
get
so
it, but
so
you
his
know,
backstory for
and
me.
Mr. Wolf from Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, but no, I mean it's true though. I mean there wasn't a lot of backstory, and Rich isn't wrong about Pale Rider. I mean you get the backstory,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
get it through watching the movie.
Through some
There's not
context, right?
right, exactly. And yeah, I agree with you, Mark. The thing with Victor, I mean, you don't know who he is. They're just sending in the cleaner, and then he
Yeah,
shows
they
up.
send in this guy, and he's like, "We'll drive around the block and come back and hit them. They won't expect it." And I was like, "I
Yeah,
love
don't get
this
me
guy."
wrong. Victor is awesome. Victor is awesome. What I'm saying is not even having him connected with an agency or any
Yeah,
of that
yeah.
stuff. Just none of that. It doesn't matter. Like he's the monster from Cloverfield. He just
Yeah.
shows up one day and he's doing his thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there you go.
I-
Monster from
I
Clover.
think it would be refreshing to see that. I think it would be refreshing to see like a predator, like I've said, the Predator versus Alien. Do one of those movies without a single human in it. I think that'd be awesome too, just to have that sort of thing. Godzilla, you don't need people in that. I don't need people in the movie. I would love to see a movie without people. I watch all kinds of documentaries, don't have people in there. Don't have some dude sitting out there in the lion pride working his way in, eating on the gazelle because we need someone to root us in reality. I'm fine seeing the honey badger diving into the beehive and doing his thing, and there's nobody standing around driving a tow truck, pulling him around, fighting the bees. So I would love to just see that just a couple times. Doesn't need to be every movie, just something like that, so that we don't have to pretend. Like a palate, like Sherbert. Okay, you can
Palate
have
cleanser.
that palate cleanser, and then we can dive back into Twilight and all that stuff. Okay, but I just
Twilight.
like something like that.
Yeah, but anyway, going back to Rebel Moon, here's what I'll say. Like,
Do we have to?
we do. We already know that this was the PG-13 version that they put out. We already know that there's an R-rated version that is, I don't know, an hour longer, whatever. And we know that there's part 2 and that they're kind of doing this whole Zack Snyder cut. And I'm like, so you on purpose put out an inferior product, or rather not the product that says Zack Snyder really wants to put out, so that you can prolong this, so that you can expand on it. And I'm like, no, put out the good version. Or if you end up with 6 hours of story, great, give me a 6-hour miniseries instead of 2 movies. Right? This is streaming. The reason movies are about 2 hours long is because we have bladders, and we need to get up and go to the bathroom, and it's hard to sit in a place for 3 hours and watch a thing, and they don't want to do intermissions and stuff like that. Like that, cool. A 2-hour movie, you can tie up a whole hour and a half. You can tie up a whole story and do that. If your story is bigger than that, nowadays with streaming, you can do all kinds of things. Right? You aren't limited to, oh, we're going to release this 2-hour movie and then it's going to be another 2-hour movie. Or if it is, put out your best 2-hour movie, not somewhat. And again, I don't think the Zack Snyder director cut saves this. Right? I really don't. And if I'm wrong, that makes it even worse.
Yeah,
you know what I
you're
mean?
not
Like
wrong.
I'm not wrong, and
No.
please prove me wrong, but I'm not. But it's one of those things like I just wanted, I really came in with some high hopes. I'm getting really tired of the disappointment. Hollywood, come on, man. What are y'all doing?
It goes to prove, remember, I've always said the difference between the smartest man and the dumbest man on the planet is really quite small. And so you look at someone who's a super successful director in Hollywood doing their thing and making their projects and all that. You know that when you go to see this movie and you look at it and you're like, come on, I could have written something better than that, and mean it. That's bad. That's
You have to wonder, guys like Peter Jackson, like why the Lord of the Rings has maintained its status as the greatest trilogy or series of all time.
I rewatched the Lord of the Rings trilogy in the last few days,
so
because it was like the 20-year anniversary. So Return of the King. So I put them back on. They do stand up.
Yeah, but the point being that you could see the care and the effort put into those films that just is not present in modern day stuff that we're seeing coming out now. Like this Rebel Moon was supposed to be his passion project, and there's no passion in it apparently.
Well, I think it comes down to, hang on. I think it comes down to, I mean, when you compare, Peter Jackson's work to others, right? I mean, Peter Jackson pushed. I mean, he was the force behind that. I mean, people have their passion project, but I mean, what does that really mean at the end? You know, I really feel excited about this thing, but I want the studio to make it, and so you're beholden to all these other things. Peter Jackson was not going to be beholden to much, you know, and
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I mean, do you actually go in and push for what you want to make, or are you willing to walk away? Or do you just, you know, you're going to take your payday, make whatever you make, the studio puts out whatever cut they want, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that Peter Jackson, when he was doing that, he was not, you know, he did I think the Frighteners and what was it? Bad, not Bad Brains, Bad Lunch, whatever his horror movie.
Blood something.
Yeah, is it his
Blood
horror movie was?
or something like that? I forget
Yeah,
what
he
it
was not, you know, a director of the epic scale that he's considered now. But he still managed to put. Yeah, I got you. I mean, I see what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree with you that at some point you kind of cut your losses and say, yeah, okay, this isn't, you know, I can't make this work. But you know, when you have someone, Zack Snyder has done many successful films that he was lauded for, and people were really looking forward to this. And it seems like it's fallen short of the mark that people wanted it to fall, you know, or rise to. I think it's a shame. I was looking forward to it. It looked good. It like the visuals were very nice. But you know, once I started hearing the plot that was coming out of it, I was like, yeah, I'll pass on it.
Yeah.
Right, the plot doesn't turn me off at all. I'm fine with a simple like, hey, let's go get us some soldiers to save the farm, or you know, some warriors or whatever. Like, I'm here for it. Seven Samurai and Magnificent Seven. Yeah, like it doesn't have to be a complicated plot. Like, I'm here for it. Yeah, but we got kind of some muddled action scenes. We got some cool visuals that didn't quite carry the story. You know what I mean?
What do you think about the current? It seems to me the current theme or trend is, well, it was for a while the superhero thing, and the superhero thing is pretty much imploded at this point. It seems that the new trend is now going to be taking some property, which we've often said in the past, they should take stories from video games because they got the best stories now. You know, it seems like that's the newer trend, is that, or what they're working towards, because you got Halo, of course, you got shows like The Last of Us, you have Fallout coming out, you know, you have a number of different ones that are based on video games at this point. And what are your thoughts? Because you've seen a few of them. You saw The Last of Us, you've seen Halo, you've seen a lot of those. What do you think? Do you think that's a viable option going forward to scout that property out, use that as something that you have a definitive base already ready to watch it and willing to, you know, go in there and all of that?
It depends.
Well, yeah, let me give you the bigger answer, right? Because it's not
Give
about
me
whether
the
we
biggest answer
it's
you
not
can.
about whether we go to comics to get ideas for what to turn into movies and television, or whether we go to video games, right? Kelly says for Hollywood is less interested in movies and more interested in content, right? If you think of like an assembly line, they want to keep the assembly line flowing, X number of movies and shows per year, keep the eyeballs, keep the attention.
Well, that Kelly guy sounds smart.
Then when something like Star Wars comes along, right, which was completely unexpected, right, and turned into this, you know, multi-billion-dollar franchise, right? Star Wars wasn't a franchise when it came out, and now they're like, wait a second, there's some money in these franchises because you have a built-in audience and you have people who want the same thing but a little different, and so I think Hollywood is now like, where do we find the next franchise? And they looked at comic books and made a lot of money on comic books, and now they're looking at video games. But the real issue is they're looking for content franchise. What can we turn into a franchise? Like Rebel Moon, they would love it to be a franchise. You could tell there's a prequel comic series in the works. There's already a second movie. They're talking about some spin-off stories for these people. All that's great, but you got to have something that I want to build a franchise on. And that's what we don't have from this first outing. And so part of it is not like, yeah, man, I would love to see a Halo TV show. Oh, that's right. You gave me one that was kind of bad. I got
Yeah.
Master Chief in the backyard digging a hole
Terrible.
looking for childhood memories. Right?
You know-
not him invading the Halo and fighting the Flood and beating the heck out of elites with his bare hands, right? Go ahead, Kelly.
Well, no, what I was going to say is that, I agree with you. I think they are looking for the next franchise, but they look for it by simply mining so much stuff, right? It's like mining in real life. You're going to dig up a mountainside in hopes that you find whatever vein of stuff exactly, actually exists there. But I think there's also this idea that you can artificially manufacture a franchise, and sure you could, but it's not of any extreme value. But all they care about it's pennies on the dollar, right? I mean, how much money are we pulling in versus how much are we putting out to produce whatever piece of dribble
Well,
we're
ask
putting out?
Disney that question for the last couple of years.
Well, I mean,
like they've had a lot of flops.
if you look at the way their manner of doing business now seems to be that they put the cart before the horse. Okay, everything is a derivative work. So not only are they
Except for Dune.
Dune, everything's a derivative work of Dune.
Of Dune,
Yes.
yes.
Thank you.
Ultimately.
And that we can all
Everything.
agree.
But
All
my point
praise
being,
Dune. All
And
praise
by the
to
way,
Iraq.
the Dune movie was great, and I'm really looking forward to the second Dune movie. I don't want this to be a reflection on like Dune. We're just joking because all the Dune fans are like everything.
Yes.
To
rapid.
be clear, I think we all liked the Dune movie, the most
Oh,
recent
yeah.
one, and
Yes.
are really looking forward
Very
to the next one. So please
Yeah.
Very
don't
much.
take that out of context, our three listeners.
So anyway, before I forget my point,
Who never watched Dune?
bringing up the holy works, you're going to make me forget my point. It seems like their entire method of doing business now is just to try and take derivative content from things that were, like you're talking about, video games, comic books, game systems. Hell, there's a Jumanji game. There's a Jumanji movie, a couple of them. Jumanji is a board. Was it a movie that was made into a board game? It was a movie made into a board game by
Yeah. Now that's
thing-
true. That's true.
I mean,
But-
Jumanji was really like Victor Victoria. I mean, it was a movie about a board game made into a board game. I mean,
yeah.
By the way, Victor Victoria, good pull, Kelly. That was
Thank
a good movie.
Yes,
That was a
it
good
was
movie.
actually a very good movie.
James Garner.
Very deep 80s cut there. But they're just putting the cart before the horse. They've tapped the well to the point where creativity just it seems to be discouraged at this point. Rebel Moon, going back to Rebel Moon, the hope for that was that it was a quote original story, but the way you guys are describing it was pieces of other stories smashed together into
It
a
was.
story and just laid out in a different fashion, right?
It
That's not
was like,
creativity.
look, Rebel Moon was like Zack Snyder wrote fan fiction of everything he ever liked in one go.
well,
Yeah,
I-
and
Sucker Punch
I'm-
was way more original than
I'm sitting
than
here
this,
reading
right?
the Wikipedia for Rebel Moon because I haven't seen it, right? And so I'm just looking at the Wikipedia description of it, and I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think, how is this not a direct ripoff of the 40K universe,
Yeah.
right?
That was another argument I had heard. Yeah, that had
It
pulled in
is, because they
40K.
called it something different.
Yeah, see, and so,
Terra
I mean,
is called the Mother World.
that's your
Yeah.
other problem. I mean, frankly, if you're trying to get ahead of something else that's currently happening in the entertainment world, so you're trying to sneak in on the side of some sort of, known IP, you've already got a weak product. But, I don't know.
Well,
I don't want to
you
go on
know-
another K-Man rant about another entertainment company that's
But
simply
you know-
disgusted me.
You know what? That might be a side benefit is that if they lower everybody's expectations like this, so that when Henry Cavill comes out with his tour de force, everyone will be not only relieved, they'll be exultant.
Yeah, but it'll make Netflix look like idiots.
One place
That's
that
all right if it brings more to
That's
the
not
flock
hard
of
to
the
do.
emperor. If
One
No,
place-
it's not hard to do. I agree.
if it brings more faithful to the flock of the emperor, then our work is done.
so
And I
looking
know that pleases you, Kelly. I know that's what you're looking for.
over programs that I've enjoyed in the last I'd say 5 to 10 years. The one place where they haven't seemed to have smashed that creativity is animation. Shows like the Squidbillies, Assy McGee, Metalocalypse.
You don't
Aqua
think
Teen
so?
Hunger.
You don't think they have though?
Not now, but in the last like Venture Brother.
Yeah, but that was all very 2000, early 2000s.
Yeah, I don't think the
2010.
world
Yeah,
needs
like-
a feature-length Squidbillies.
They're
I think that's
definitely
exactly
not.
what the world needs right now.
I think they do, but I
I've
don't
watched
think they'll
3 I've
ever
watched
put that out.
I've watched 3 Aqua Teen movies. They haven't been that great. But my point being that storytelling, like the show Primal, which I really like, the Gendy Todorowsky. Right now, there's one on Netflix I haven't caught yet, but Blue Eye Samurai is
I've heard
apparently
really
very-
good things. I'm halfway
Yeah.
through like the first episode.
So-
Yeah, Helena wanted me to ask if you guys had
Yeah.
seen that. I said
Yeah,
I refuse.
It seems to me that a lot of the things that I've really enjoyed in the last 10 years or so have been in that animation market where it's kind of slips in on the side and it gets some buzz.
Arcane. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them that seem to have more original, but the constraint that isn't on them is that they're much cheaper to make because you can do anything in an animated universe, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to pay people. You don't have to do this. The VFX are much less expensive to develop.
Yeah, but you don't think that shows like The Last of Us have more emotional impact, more of a cultural impact than any of those, because those are going to be far more removed from reality, whereas as fantastical as The Last of Us is, because it's live action, it has more of a rooted, more accessible storyline and emotional content and punch.
I hear you, but the
It
Japanese
ruined-
have been telling stories in
Yeah,
comic
what-
format, and the Japanese
Who
have been
has?
telling stories.
Oh,
The
I
Japanese
guess.
in
Yeah.
comic
Ma-
and anime format.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they've got. You're right. There is that kind of mental barrier of, oh, this is animated children's. Like in the West, animation is for children.
Right.
In Japan, animation is a medium
For
of
everyone.
storytelling,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
and
not,
and
I'm
I
not
think I
arguing
know,
with that, by the
and
way.
I think
Yeah.
we're getting to the point where we're able to see a good story, even if it's animated, right? We've got the Love, Death, and Robots, and we've got some of these newer ones that are animated. Again, I think Japan's at the forefront of that, but that's where comics have been able to find their foot for years. Like there are some amazing stories in comics, right? Some of these that have been turned into really, really good movies, but how many have yet to be taken from the comic page and turned into a really, really good, live action or even, animated feature, whether that's a show or a TV. Like, problem is Hollywood keeps messing it up because they want to water it down. So go ahead,
Well,
Rich.
one of the things that you bring up a good point, because I like this. They're taking manga and turning it into anime or vice versa. One of the series that I really like is called Neon Genesis Evangelion. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's giant robots. They put teenagers in giant robots and make them fight against angels. So they did a first series.
At giant robots.
Yeah. So yeah, they're pretty cool giant robots. But they did a first series and it finished. So they, it was an episodic anime, and then they did a couple of movies to finish it off because apparently the creator went insane trying to build this thing. But now they've done something called the rebuild of Evangelion, where they took the original story and they changed it up, dressed up the effects for the modern era, because this was made in the 90s, early 2000s. Now we're in the 21st century. But then they changed the story. They did four movies, I think, but they changed the story, and they did, while the story is different, it's related to the original material, and they changed some stuff that they didn't either have the technology to do in the first series, or they had better ideas later on. The same director did this second series. But it was an example of a derivative work that didn't corrupt what came before, and they changed it and it was accepted. Like, people liked it. Some people didn't like it as much, but for the most part, it was taken as, this is okay.
Yeah,
And what
and in
we're
some
seeing-
ways, I think it can even be better. For example, when you cut out entirely Tom Bombadil from the Lord of the Rings movies,
Don't Don't defame my lord.
Right.
Um,
A little known fourth movie by Peter Jackson that didn't
Yeah.
get cut.
he was there. But the point being that I think, like going to the comics example, you're right. They've gone so far beyond not wanting to actually cleave to the source material that it becomes unrecognizable. You know, what we're seeing today that they're calling, X-Men in the comics isn't X-Men anymore. And people get pissed about that because it's not what they signed up for. It's like, oh, it's got the name, but it doesn't have the soul, right?
Some
Well,
of that
that's-
is ego, right? Because when you make a movie, right, the script writer is going to write the script, but there's always going to be somebody else that wants to rewrite this or add this or do that, and sometimes that can be good, and sometimes it's just somebody muddling with the original piece of work to kind of put their stamp on it or whatever. And Hollywood filmmaking is an inherently collaborative process, and in some cases that can be great because we've seen examples where we leave this guy alone and let him make whatever he wants because he's the golden child, and they deliver Avatar, right? Which looks
Avatar
great,
2.
but was written by a third grader kind of thing. So like, I don't want to say that it's always bad because it isn't, but when you have this amazing source material, but someone in Hollywood wants to put their own spin on it, is that to make the story better, or is it because they want a writing credit, or because they just want to get their hose it down with their ego and be like, look, I made these changes. And it's subjective. I get it. Are these changes in service of the story? Or are these changes in service of somebody's ego?
Well,
I think we've seen both, but more often than not, I think we've seen more ego than story servicing, right?
Give in to that budding disdain, Mark. Way to go.
Yeah, I
Where's that, brother?
But I think that's why the video games. I think that's why that's become more of the new mining source, is that a lot of the difficult work has already been done. There's not as much of a history to it like there is with comics. So if you change a couple things, you do something different, or you radically do so, you're not going to be pissing off as large a segment of the population as you do with something that's been around for 50, 60 years, that kind of thing.
Right.
It gives you the option.
And you have the benefit of that built-in fan base audience, and Five Nights at Freddy's comes to mind. I had no idea that was a video game when I went to see it, and the 12-year-old's talking about all this backstory stuff and this, that, and the other, and I'm like, oh, apparently this has something before it. It's not just Chuck E. Cheese horror movie, which is what I thought going in, and I'm like, okay, so I can see it.
It isn't.
Think about the who was it? Ridley Scott was talking about he would do storyboards to sell his movies. He, like with Alien and Gladiator and all that, he said it was so much easier because he was a trained artist. He'd sit there and do storyboards and show his investors, because he said they don't have the same imaginative, sense that the artists do. So you show them, this is what Chestburster is going to look like. Isn't this going to be cool up on the screen? And he said right there, it bumps it up by, so many $1 million for his budget, right? Well, if you already have something fully formed, like a video game, not just storyboard, but fully fledged story.
You can pull cutscenes out of and stills and all that.
You think about like The Last of Us and the whole scene with her and that dude with the cult, where he's trying to be a predator and all that stuff. You know how difficult that would have been to get into a story just on its own, because it can be so disturbing, But the emotional content and hit is there because it's already been fully formed, and they spent millions and millions of dollars, and you can see the return on investment. So it makes it almost like a no-brainer to them, okay, well, let's do that. Let's put it out to this larger audience.
But then you end up with something like Halo.
Right. And that's why I'm wondering, do you think this will be a better avenue for them to go as far as mining the content, because you'll get less Halo retribution and more Last of Us?
I think you're going to get more Halo. than you will Last of Us.
You do.
I do.
Hmm.
I
The
do.
track record says Kelly's right. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I mean, historically, video game movies have been awful. And
Right.
I'm looking at you, 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
You know,
So what's the Christian
Commander.
Slater one? Into the Dark, or the Christian Slater one that's panned is one of the worst movies ever made. That was based on a video
Because, I
game.
mean, look, I mean, to go back to
No.
my original point with the whole mining, okay?
Yeah.
Really transformative stories come along every once in a while. And yeah, we can say that Lord of the Rings looks like and feels like other stories have been told. You can say Harry Potter is simply looks like a different version of what was said in Lord of the Rings. I mean, they follow a particular pattern in and of themselves. And you would think that knowing that pattern or even being able to recognize it would mean that you could reproduce what was done. You can't, because there's this unknown quantity of how people are going to react
the
to
magic
a thing.
pixie dust that we've talked about in previous
I mean,
episodes. Like
I
it
think-
all comes together, and you end up with Goonies or Princess
Right.
Bride or Star Wars, which was found in the editing room. Right? Had Lucas released his version of Star Wars, it would not be what it ended up being. Right?
And
So-
I think it's the same for video games, and I think it's the same for movies about video games. Is I mean, you can have something as rich as Halo, which has many versions.
You would
of it
think
have
would
come
be
out,
a no-brainer.
and Hollywood still does what it needs to do to
Well,
it, right?
Yeah.
You think-
Yeah. You would think it would be a no-brainer, and
Right.
somehow they get it wrong.
I mean, the
Makes
challenge
sense.
with Halo is that you've got a character that has no, particular emotional attachment to anything. Right? He's just a mission-oriented individual. Now, granted, there's this relationship he developed, sort of, and I think you guys are going to understand what I'm saying. The relationship he developed with Cortana.
Yeah.
It's not a romantic relationship, but it's a relationship, and in a lot of ways, it's that relationship that a lot of military people will talk about, of being able to count on the person to the left and the right of you, and Cortana is the representation of all of that.
Yeah.
But that's a story that's very challenging
and
to
she's
tell
a
if you've
great
never
character.
experienced it.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they did a really good job with Cortana
Yeah.
as well, and I'm going to give credit to the voice actress and et cetera, et cetera. Like,
Oh yeah, 100%.
but Cortana's a great character. So
So I think it comes down to, with derivative material where you're basing something off of another source, I think what's being lost nowadays is a respect for the source. It's not just content. That source is meaningful to people because of how it was made in the first place. And
right,
what
and I
you're
will say
doing-
this about Peter Jackson. I saw his interview where he was like, "We didn't put our message into these movies. We focused on J.R. Tolkien's message." Like,
Correct.
that is complete opposite of people who making things today. They're like, we want to update this for modern audiences, and we want to, tell this, some tale, or we want to, point out the wrongs of society. And like, there's places for that. There
It's a
really
bait
is. So
and
like, I'm
switch.
fine with it, but those places are not Lord of the Rings. Otherwise, you end up with Rings
Yeah.
of Power.
Yes, and that was going to be my point. It's a bait and switch, right?
I'm
Here's
sorry.
this shiny thing that looked great because it's based on this thing that you love.
Yep.
And then they switch it and say, and then here's our thing that we gave you that has nothing to do with that and is in fact agenda driven or whatever the reason for the changes in the story. But it's a lack of respect. The content is treated like it's only valuable for how much money it can make, not for the story it can tell. And that is part of the damage that's being done to the entire entertainment industry on all levels, every type of media.
Yeah.
Well, let me
There's
ask you.
respect for
Let me ask you then, because I want to.
No.
This is also kind of all right.
Go ahead.
All right. No.
Go on, I'll allow it.
You sure? Okay. All right.
Permission.
So, with that in mind,
Yeah.
with that in mind, this obviously is not something that's just limited to movies, TV, something
Yeah.
like that. This also seems to cross over into things like the source material itself in some cases, like for instance with D&D. You've seen them implode themselves over time.
Mhm.
How does that then happen? Is it the same mechanism? Is it the lack of passion? Is it because it
No.
would seem that they have the right people for, in some circumstances, for being able to come up with the content that they have. So how do you end up with now, what is it? Hasbro laying off however many
Thousands.
people.
1,100
Thousands.
people or something.
Yeah, something like that. How do you end up where we are now, where they have pissed off so many of their own people and it's gone downhill, even though by many accounts they've still got really good, product itself. They've lost so much of their own and lost them to so many others. How does that then happen with something that has that built-in
I've
built-in
thought about
loyalty?
this. I've thought about this, and I think the reason is that they don't actually have the right people. They have people that come in that despise the source material. They don't
Now,
like
are you talking about the decision makers, or are you talking about the content creators?
a little of column A and a little of column B. I think if you have it's a weighted system, right? The scale of quality, if you put enough heavy weight on the part that despises the source material, it's eventually going to just tip off the whole balance, right? Of what of being acceptable to the majority of people. I think that there is truly people that don't like comic books in particular. There's people that just don't like the comics that they've been employed to write. It's obvious they don't like them because they destroy the characters as quickly as they can as soon as they're hired. And I think the same thing has happened to D&D. There's people that they don't like the source material because of whatever reason. It's racist, it's sexist, it's politically uncooperative to their belief systems, whatever. So they come in there and they say, well, we're going to cannibalize this thing that people like because we want to change their attitudes or whatever. But it ends up driving people to other. People are constantly. It seems lately people are constantly fleeing from the things that they love to try and find things they do love that they can still love. They flee from comics to video games. They flee from video games to RPGs. They flee from RPGs to toy soldiers. And when you have that rare exception where a content creator or content company holds the line and says, no, we are not going to bend to the pressure of whatever, or they are very smart about their hiring decisions or selective, I should say, about who they allow to touch what they've created, you end up with a product that kind of stands the test of time. I thought that Lord of the Rings could never be brought down until all of the children that cared about it died. And once Christopher Tolkien died, Lord of the Rings was cannibalized just like all the others. I think that the problem is that there's people that actively don't like the things they're hired to make.
No, they just, I don't know. I'm not going to disagree with you, Rich, because I think there is that is a definite element. But and I've said this before on previous episodes. It also has to do with what you see the thing is. I mean, is it really a passion project for you, or do you just see dollar signs, right? And I'm looking at you, Disney. They see dollar signs.
Destructive.
Actually,
Right.
let me jump in there, going back to D&D, Hasbro, right? And I almost hate to do this, but there's a YouTuber I'm not a particular fan of, but she actually made this point on a podcast I was listening to earlier that made sense. And she said something to the effect of like, hey, whenever something goes public, whenever it's a publicly traded company that takes over a thing, now it's not about making the cool thing, it's about shareholder return and making the money. So this is two things dealing with Hasbro. Number one, they just want to make some money, and the whole OGL scandal that they shot themselves in the foot and have done irreparable harm to them and to D&D was about money, right? Because they saw like, oh, we're giving all this stuff away for free.
Yeah.
How do we pull that back in house? And some junior lawyers like, I got an idea. Let's rescind the OGL. And look how that worked out. Oh my gosh, did that blow up in their face, right? But like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make some money.
Yeah.
How you go about doing that is you put out a good product, and we'll give you some money, right? You're D&D, you're the 500-pound gorilla, but you wanted to create a monopoly, and you want to force everybody into your virtual tabletop, which is step two. Step two is they don't want to create; they want to just milk, right? Yeah. And so you can lay off 1,100 people when the rule books are done. I'm looking at you, next edition, right? You're not laying off art directors unless the artwork's already taken care of and the books are laid out and they're off to the printer or something.
Well, when did
Yeah.
they announce the layoffs?
Like a
2
week
weeks
before
ago.
Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all
something
right.
like
So
that,
so
yeah.
all that is, and this is in support of your point there, Mark. All that is corporate maneuvering. What do? You lay off people in Q4 so that you can hit your numbers for end of year,
Yeah.
which helps your stock price. And then in Q1 and Q2, you're going to end up hiring some people back, maybe. I mean, it is just nothing more than corporate maneuvering, which supports your point of just milking the thing.
Right, but
Yeah.
you don't need the developers if you have the stable edition of the rules, and now you're just going to shift over to a subscription model for just about everything.
Yeah.
Cool. And now you're selling what? Digital horse armor for
Yeah.
$2, which is no real effort compared to let's create a rule system that is balanced and fun and et cetera, et cetera. And I did some math. Like if we took 1,100 employees and they were making $50,000 a year, that's $55 million a year in savings, and I bet some of them made way more than that. And then when you factor in health insurance and
Oh, it's more than
benefits, et cetera.
55. I mean, because you figure any company's paying twice what they pay the
Right,
employee.
so
in
that's
tax.
$110 million dollars.
Yeah.
Going with those numbers, like that's not an insignificant amount. Like, okay, how much was there some fat there, or did you bring on a bunch of people to
No,
get
that's
this latest edition out the door, and now you don't need them anymore? Bye.
No, and I don't think there's that much thought into it, to be honest with you.
Okay.
It's nothing more than a
Could be.
decision from up top that says, hey, your budget is now X, and
Yeah.
we've got to hit this number, and so these are the layoffs that happen. It's the standard corporate model.
Right, which goes back to that original point. Now that a corporation is in charge and they're focused on stock price and numbers and making sales, that's different than I want to put out the best game that I can. This is the coolest version. This is the best, we're shipping the best video game, whatever it is. You know what I mean? At some point, it becomes less about the art or the thing and more about that bottom line. And it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes that can be good because otherwise an artist will just mess around endlessly and never put the thing out because it's not perfect, right?
And here's the deal. I think there's, somebody could probably argue that I just seem very anti-capitalist. And I'm not so much anti-capitalist. I'm anti-shareholder supremacy is what I am.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think capitalism that's built on the idea of what does the community want and let me produce that thing so the community gets what they, go for it. That's great. But that's not what we're seeing in this, and that's not what we've seen for a long time, right? We're we look at the number of sequels that have been made about anything, right? All the sequels are simply, hey, how much more money can we get out of this if we simply make, hey, dude, where's my car? Part 3.
Resident Evil.
That movie doesn't work anymore because everybody has like their phone. They could be like, oh, there's my car. Credit roll.
No,
this is easy.
And we've seen it. Mark, you in a rare moment went on a rant about a movie whose name I've long since forgotten in like a couple episodes ago.
A rare movement.
Look, they got you to go in and see a movie, right? And that's
was it Napoleon? That was the one I think I was most upset about more recently.
That was where they, the thing is, can I get somebody to just part with their money?
Yeah.
And that's all. Let's kill the golden goose to try to get all the eggs. And Sean, to your point, that's what ultimately kills a franchise. That's what ultimately kills us. So you can have a really dynamite story, but as soon as you try to kill that golden goose, that story is going to die with it.
Yeah, it's the worry that we all share for the 40K properties going to the entertainment market.
Put your Hollywood producer hat on. Right,
Yeah.
Your mogul executive at Disney or Miramax or whoever, right? And you're like, oh, where can we get our next, trove of stuff that we can make content around? And we've done comics, cool, and we've done these video games, and we've done, remakes of other movies, older movies, and whatnot. And you start eyeing 40K, and you look at their fan base, and you look at how deep their IP is, and you're like, ooh, I want to get me a piece of that.
We could tear
like,
this to
I
pieces.
understand the interest. Like I would love to see him just get it and do it right. Man, I'm getting so tired of being burned.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is not hard. Just tell me an entertaining story. Respect the source material. Lord of the Rings, that shit. You know what I mean?
Do you think you're going to be able to find? Do you think the point at which you're going to feel better or worse about it will be when you find out the first project and who they're having direct it?
What are we talking
No,
about?
no, I
Recording of
don't.
it?
Here's the thing. Like, let
Like
me go
if-
back to Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
That was a cultural phenomenon. That was one of the best things ever put on moving pictures. It's not film, I get it. It's HBO. But man, like they were hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, it was well done.
There was no reason for them to fall down those last 2 seasons. None.
Well, they
Other
ran out
than
of
sheer
material.
hubris. I know,
Yeah.
but still,
They had to write it themselves.
you can get George R. R. Martin on the phone. You did not
didn't
run out
care.
of material.
He didn't want to.
I don't care. You have it direct access to the guy who created it.
Yes.
Right? That is true. That
Even
is a
he
fact.
got
He's an
disinterested.
executive producer. I don't care.
Yeah.
You did not have to phone in that last series and literally screw it up so bad that you undid all of the good works that you did in the first 6 or 7.
Well, I think
you
I
know,
think
like,
Not that.
oh my gosh,
All
like
about
no,
that.
no,
you were
I
chasing.
think that-
No, they
think-
wanted to go make movies or oh,
No.
we're so past this.
I'm not letting our Martin off that easy. I think he had every opportunity. He's not interested in his project anymore. He doesn't want to finish it. He's not interested. He wants to play with RC cars in his $1 million mansion. He's just not interested in
Can you
finishing his
blame him?
series.
Well, in
No,
all
no,
honesty,
but
in all honesty, I
that's where
think
it fell
he's,
down.
in all honesty, I think he screwed himself on it from a creative aspect, not monetary, but from a creative aspect. Because if you think about it, as a author, you go in and you have a conversation with him. Remember, they said he told us what he plans to do. We
Yeah.
know what he plans to do with it. So if they base it off that, everybody's pissed about what he had planned to do with the story. So if it ends that way, they're going to be like, well, that sucked. That sucked double donkey nuts
But
because
it's
I
his
not only
vision.
had to do it once, I had to do it twice, right?
Yeah.
But then if he changes it from what was in there, he has to not only change it, but come up with something that is not only better than, but like up to what people were saying they wanted his
Right,
original
but
to be.
here's the thing for George R. R. Martin, he's got this HBO train wreck of how it ended, and he gets to see, boy, had I written that, look how that would have turned out.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
hold on, talk about the ultimate focus group, right?
Yeah.
The ultimate beta reader audience, right?
Yeah.
He knows what doesn't work.
That's terrible.
And he's got hold on, let me finish. And he's got millions of people putting out into the universe. Oh, you know what I think would have been really cool? A cool way to end it is this and that and the other. So he's got so much to work from, because there's, like, I've seen YouTube videos where like, oh, here's how I would have done Star Wars differently, or the prequel trilogies, or the whatever. And I was like, oh, that was actually really cool. You think there's a lot of people who haven't thought about that for Lord of the Rings? Like, he's.
Well, I think they have.
In one way, he's given himself more flexibility in how to do it and what to avoid, that I think no author has ever had in the history of writing books.
Well, but see, I don't see it like that, because no matter what he chooses now, it's not going to be as good as it should have been, and it's going to be somebody's idea for how it should have ended.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, you ripped off my story and all that, and you're just a hack and all this. He's far better served at this point just not finishing it.
Yeah, he
leaving it
checkmated
up to
himself.
everybody. Yeah.
Right, but
Yeah.
regardless
Leaving
of
it up
which
to
way
everybody
he
and going
goes,
off and
he's
playing
got
with
that
his strings.
Hollywood money now, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Right,
he doesn't
so
care.
that's what
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
saying.
with you.
He's better off just not doing anything with it at all.
So here's my
Go ahead.
fear, Sean. In my fear with the 40K thing in particular is that we've been clobbered so many times, like you've mentioned, it's been burned so many times that they're going to do something mediocre and we're going to praise it. We're going to be like, it's just a breath
No.
of fresh air.
Right,
And that's
part of the concern. Like,
This
let's water
group
it
is going
down
to-
and make it maximum audience.
what's
You know,
that, Kelly?
'cause 40K is rated R. You know,
This-
at
This
its basic
group,
level. Go ahead,
I mean,
Kelly.
just look at the four of us. You think this group is going to praise a half-assed attempt at 40K?
No, I'm talking
No.
about in general, not just
Yeah.
this group, but
No,
I'm talking about in general. We will
Here's-
beat it. Beat it down.
Here's the problem that 40K is going to run into. I mean, it's got a fan base, but if you're a fan of 40K, you've been in 40K for more than a minute.
A
Right.
lifetime, basically.
And so you have an expectation of what's supposed to happen. Now, here's the problem they're going to have. They're not going to deliver that. They're not going to deliver. They can't meet that expectation. If you think that they're going to come in and they're going to tell the Horus Heresy exactly the way Dan Abnett and others have written it out in all the books, Primarchs are going to say things that they've never said. They're going to be places they've never been. That's what Tom Hanks said. When he
80s one-liners.
Angron, we got to talk about gender diversity in the World Eaters.
That's right. Remember when I said I'd kill you last? I lied.
No, but like Tom Hanks had this conversation when he did the what was it, the story of the captain whose ship was taken by the Somali pirates,
Oh, right.
and
I'm the captain now.
Captain Phillips, right? And he also had this conversation with the guy Dick Winters from Band of Brothers, where he said, look, I mean, in order to tell this story, there's going to be things that are said that you never said, and we're going to be places that you've never been. And there is an element to that with the story that they're going to have to do. That's going to irritate and piss off people who are going to say, well, it's not being true to the source material. I get that there's going to be some departure from source material. How much is that going to alienate people who are diehard fans, and how much work are they going to have to do to bring in people that are going to make this worth it, who've never played 40K a day in their life?
So it's interesting because recently, and I'm going to shout out another YouTuber. It's a channel called The Outer Circle, where the guy's a big 30K fan. He's been into 30K for 30 years.
10,000 years have gone on since then, right?
Well, yeah, but he's roundly considered to be very cynical about what they've been producing, and he's been very hard on Games Workshop's effort with the new Horus Heresy. So he's been playing since the first, before the first edition, and now he's not very happy with the way they've kind of homogenized the second edition of the Horus Heresy. But I've been listening to him because he talks a lot about. I think you'd like him, K-Man, because he very much talks about the business of producing a product which is worthy of the customer that they're trying to recruit, right?
Sure.
And that the level of quality needs to reach a certain level in order to be acceptable. And the more you accept lesser quality material, the worse the material becomes, because the bar gets lowered, and they can just keep pumping out stuff. And I'm curious, especially since there's talk that they're going to go towards the Horus Heresy for this entertainment property that they're pushing forward. There's been talk about, they might set it in that era. It's he uses the word elitist, but it is a very critical audience that you're going into. And I see what you guys are saying, Sean and Mark, about how much they're going to have to change it in order to make it palatable to people. That it's honestly, if you look at the Heresy story, it's an unpalatable story. It's hard to get into. It's long. It's complicated. You need to have an attention span. Like look at reading The End and the Death, right? We got 3 novels right now that are standing at like almost 3,000 pages, and there's another 1,500 page novel coming. So you got the last part of the story is 44,000-ish pages worth of material.
Yeah, cut to the chase and just say the Emperor was wrong.
But my point being that the entire series of novels is 50 books, I'm saying that. What I'm saying is that I personally like that kind of depth. That, for me, being a longtime fan, I'm willing to put in the effort. You have to wonder how much effort people are going to want to put into a series. I think that's what Game of Thrones always got criticized. The story's complicated. There's too many characters. What made it interesting, because you had to be invested in it. The same thing with Doctor Who. Doctor Who now, you have 50 years of story that they've decided to homogenize and discard for modern audiences. But you don't have to go back. Like, if you wanted to get into Doctor Who, eventually you had to go back and watch the previous series to kind of understand what was going on, because there were references made, right?
Sure.
You know, the 11th Doctor was referenced by the 14th, or the 4th Doctor was referenced by the 10th. You know,
and I think it's a valid
Go ahead.
point, Rich. But here's the thing: is that we have a track record that says people will make that investment. If
I
you
hope
put out
so.
a product worth the investment, people will make
Yeah.
the investment. The problem in the equation is are the creators giving people that benefit
Yes.
of the doubt to say that they'll make
Right,
that
and-
investment.
And again, I don't know that you right out of the bat start with the Horus Heresy. I don't think
Yeah.
that's a good idea, right? And when you approach from a production standpoint, you're like, oh, okay, we now are playing in the 40K sandbox, right? Change the word 40K to World War II, right? Oh, okay, we're gonna make a World War II TV show, Rat Patrol. We're gonna make a World War II movie, Saving Private Ryan. Oh, but we've also got the Pacific and Band of Brothers, and all this stuff took place during World War II.
Yeah.
You could tell so many stories in the 40K sandbox.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be Game of Thrones, where we're following this one thing all the way through.
So you
Or
want a
can
40K
you have-
monument, man?
Yeah, we could do Monuments Men. We could do, like
The focus,
would I
right?
watch something about Necromunda? Yes, I would. I'm a 40K fan, right? Would I watch something about the Catachan Jungle Fighters or Gaunt's Ghost? Hell yeah, I would. Is it Space Marines? No. Do I want Space Marines? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And
Nobody's
again, I
tuning
think the
into
very
40K
top
to
of
watch a
that
Hive
pinnacle
world.
is going to be the Horus Heresy. I get it. Like, I'd love to see that. I don't
I'm
know
watching
that anybody is experienced enough to do that right out of the bat. I want them to hone their craft and give me some other stories.
Want to watch 40K to see a world get fusion bombed from space. I want to see a space marine land on a planet and
Dark.
cut into some
Grim
things
dark.
with a chain-sword.
Yep.
I
Yes.
mean, yeah, lean into what it
Yes.
is.
Right. I want to see I want to see that cutscene from that movie there, from that video game years ago, the real-time strategy, right, where the orcs are fighting the space marines. That's what we want to see. Like,
Dawn
it
of
doesn't
War.
have to be complicated.
Dawn of War.
Give me the Dawn of War cutscene expanded, right?
Well-
you can follow a chapter of Space Marines, go, and tell some really awesome, compelling, action-filled stories.
Yeah.
And
I
which
think
is why I'm not
see-
wrapped around the axle about what they're going to announce or what they're choosing. At some point, I
See-
just have to go, hey, do I trust these guys to give me what I want? Well, I have some
I think they should
reservations,
start with the
but
slant.
go. I don't
Here's
have
gonna be-
I don't have a.
Here's going to be the last word, and this will
The
be the
first
last
series is
word.
going to be called Fire Warrior.
This is me, the last word, and this is the right answer, and we'll end on this. Okay, a Muppets heresy, and I think we can all agree.
You know what? I agree.
I think we can all agree that is what the first outing needs to be.
We
Kermit
could do a
as the
whole
Emperor.
episode.
Kermit is
Whole
the Emperor. Miss
episode.
Piggy is the Captain General.
Sam the Eagle is Rogel Dorn.
All you
Clearly,
need is
obviously.
a Muppets heresy with Michael Caine and Christopher Walken,
Yes.
and that's it. That's it. That's our last word. That
Animal is Karn the Betrayer or
That
Angron.
answers. That answers,
Gonzo as Sanguinius.
that answers
That's
all.
exactly
No,
what I was thinking.
Gonzo. No, Gonzo would be the Night Haunter. That's who he would be.
Yes.
Because remember, he was always the Phantom of the Opera. He was always playing that character. He would be the Night Haunter.
Oh, we could do a whole episode on this.
We
Muppet
could.
Heresy. It'd be
We
great.
could. And I think it would be great. Yes.
Someone get
So,
Mr. Cavill on the phone.
Yeah, get him right on the phone.
We need to be part of this creative
Think
team.
that wouldn't
Talk-
think that
talk-
wouldn't get a
talk about a
billion
palate
views.
cleanser. Yeah.
Yeah.
Be fantastic, especially if you actually did it realistically. So they were, when they ripped the Muppets apart, they had little strings coming out of them, and
If you did that as a fan project, it would get a billion views on YouTube.
you get sued to Jesus by multiple companies.
Well, if you're gonna get sued, you might as
Satire.
well get sued by all of
Satire.
them.
Yeah, you might as well go big.
Yeah.
You're covered because it's satire. So,
Yep.
all right, boys. Well, on that glorious note, I will see you guys next week. And the K-Man, we'll see where you visited then, where you plan to go at that point. All right, boys. Have a good one. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.
Love you.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.